Andrew's Cayley in the Masons Hall next door. You'll be very welcome to come along. It's to raise some funds because we're proposing to build a store. We need some extra space for storing our all our artefacts. And it'd be lovely to see any of you there if you can come. Any donations of baking for the supper would be most welcome. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Angus, who's going to entertain us tonight. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm not sure if I'll use a microphone or not. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
I'll try and keep shouting. If I fade away, give me a quick shout and I'll speak up a bit. Thanks very much for coming tonight. It's great to see such a lot of people. But then I suppose Patrick Seller's always been a good puller. Since many people in the room since his trial in 1816. Anyway, it's a great pleasure for me to come and speak to you about Culmaily and inevitably Patrick Sellers, because it was Patrick Seller who was responsible for laying out so much of the whole of the farm, and he did an awful lot of improvements in Sutherland, and for a guy who was only factor for 6-7 years, he did an awful lot of damage and some good as well. Anyway, we came down here in 1971, and I've always had a great interest in history. We came down from the Stratford Kildonnan. I was brought up in Donald Sage's house in Kildonnan. So I was well steeped in the clearances from a very young age, and coming down and farming at Culmaily has been a great thing, and I'm really enjoying it. Trying to get master of the technology. Yeah, the Culmaily has not changed a great deal since it was laid out in the 1810s. It's about 600 acres of grazing, and it used to have 500 acres of hill, but the estate took it back for planting trees. And it's been it was tenanted in the Mccall family since 1971 until we were able to buy it in 2016, when we were suddenly approached by the estate, where it was actually the factor Malcolm Taylor and Alexander, and they asked us if we would like to buy the farm. And so obviously we jumped at the opportunity. So the only stipulation was that we gave the hill back so they could plant trees on it. We're currently cropping 200 acres of barley, and we've got about 300 acres of grass, and we rent in some land as well. We're running 110 cows, which makes a total of about 260 head, and that's run by Ewan, who's the big room in the corner, with some part-time help. And we also have a holiday cottage business for the cottages. Now, the first tenant of the first of the Mccalls to come here was my father, who got the tenancy in 1971. He was very lucky to get the tenancy because he applied for it after Ian Weir handed in his notice to quit, and my father applied for it along with a lot of other people, and he didn't actually get the tenancy. So he went back up to Kildonnan and said, well, that's, I've given it my best shot, so we'll just have to see what comes up next. So a few months passed, and then the day of the rout, we got a phone call from Michael Scott, the factor, and said, are you still interested in that farm? And he said, yes, of course. Why? What's happened? And he said, well, the chap who's come up from Hampshire, and he came up by himself to tender for the farm, and he's now come up with his wife, and his wife says, I'm not staying in this barn of a house. so he handed in his, he relinquished his attempt at the tenancy. So it passed on to my father, who had to quickly leave. This was about 9 o'clock in the morning, so he had to get to the bank, speak to the banker, say, can I have some money? Spoke to his brother, Robbie, at Invergora, and Robbie dashed along and started trying to buy stuff. So that's how we got there. And interestingly, we're the 5th family to have farmed the Culmaily since it was formed, and my father's the 3rd major to be a tenant of it. So it says, I don't know, it says something of the army training or what. Someone said to me there's not so long ago that there's been 3 major, your father's the 3rd major to tenant the farm, and you're the 4th one, major disaster. So sorry, I'm not very good at these things. Now, one of the great things of living at Culmaily is that on a daily basis, you see it's so full of history, and wherever you walk around the farm, you see things that have a historical connection. This pile of stones up here, that's underneath the Silver Rock, and that was where there were black houses. This is the tail end of the mill lead, which Sellers, when he built, no, it wasn't actually Sellers, this is his son, when they built the steading, they put new threshing mills at the back, and the mill lead ran under the steading and out into Culmaily Burn. And this here is the you might call it the sort of harbour of the canal, because we'll speak about the canal later on, but they built a canal from the little ferry to haul stuff up and down, because it was otherwise it would be by horse and cart on a long road. So that was the tail end of that. This is the only the steading got burnt down in a fire in 1959, and this is the only bit of the old steading that's still here. This is Paul's here tonight or not. This is Paul's house, and the old steadings were here. And the picture that we saw of the canal harbour is on the other side of Paul's house. And interestingly enough, I'm pretty sure that was the site of this house that Patrick Seller built for himself when he got the tenancy in 1810. Because there's quite a bit of reference to his great rival was Sheriff McKidd, who lived in Kirkton Farmhouse, and there was a comment made that Sheriff McKidd would keep a very close eye on what Patrick Sellers was doing from his house, and that is a direct line of sight from Kirkton Farmhouse. Sorry.
As far as you can go.
So that's part of the history of the buildings. Now, just a word about Sutherland pre-clearances. Can we put the projector up a bit so we can see the screen at the bottom? Yeah, it doesn't adjust. That's it. Yeah, during the 1700s, the 19th century, the landholding was still operating under the feudal clan system, and the land was still held under what was known as the tax system, and the tax system was there would be a pyramid of control. At the top of the pyramid would be the laird, in this case the countess, and then she would dispense her authority down through her factor to the taxman, and the taxman would lease the land from the estate and they would then re-let it to subtenants, and their income would come from the rent that they extracted from the subtenants. So it was still run on this system, very feudal, and it was found using the run-rig system, which is a very old way of managing land, where you farm the land in strips, and it was done on a communal basis, and every year you changed a strip, so no one, everyone had a fair share of the land, but obviously it was not a very efficient way of doing it. After the Battle of Culloden, there were big changes afoot. As you all know, they tried the London government tried to break the spirit of the Highlanders in particular, and the wearing of tartan was banned, bearing arms were banned, etc., etc. And this also had this effect on the lairds, because previously they would run a sort of, it was almost like having a small country. They had their own they had their own patch of land which they governed, and they had a private army which they extracted, which was filled with their subtenants and the workers. So there was a great emphasis in those days of keeping people on the land, because if you ever could be getting into a fight, then you'll be able to gather up plenty of soldiers from the clansmen. But after Culloden, this changed, and the land became valuable not for being able to maintain a big enough population to give fighters, but the emphasis came on how much money could be produced from the land. So throughout Scotland, there was a big change to try and make agriculture efficient and try and extract as much rent as they could. And there was a big pressure on some estates to improve their income from the estates. It had started a good few years earlier in other parts of Scotland, so it was some of the estates were very much behind the pillar. One of the restricting factors with some of the estates in those days was that they were plenty of land but not much cash. But in 1785, the Countess married Lord Stafford, and he got he came up with a large fortune, which increased dramatically in 1805 when the Duke of Bridgewater died, and he left him all of his money. So they now had sufficient funds to do what they would really like to do, and the Countess and her son Lord Gower, they were keen to get going and try and improve the land. So they started initially. They started with building roads and bridges, and they started to improve the farmland. Now this is a map. I don't know if you can see it. This is a map of Culmaily in 1772, and I can hardly see it from here. And Culmaily is up. That's Culmaily is this bit of land here, and as you can see, it's formed in these run-rig strips. The ferry road, which was the main road out, and the road that was involved in the Battle of Little Ferry, that ran along here, and when it came down to here, it went up here, and then it went out that way, and it went up Strathfleet, and there was a ford at Pitton Trail. So if you weren't able to go over to go over by the ferry, that was it. That was the other way out. Well, one of the first things that the estate did, and this was under the previous factor, Cosmo Volkman, they decided that they wanted to, if they're going to have a new farm up here, the communications would have to be improved. So they, and the land would also have to be drained so they could grow crop. So they built this canal which ran down here from where the A9 is now, down the straight line, and then it down to the Fleet. And that was the sort of the start of the improvement on Culmaily Farm. And in 1810, this is a pictorial a depiction of the map. This is all the various tacks. This Culmaily is, sorry. So Culmaily is here, and this is what was Culmaily there. There's the Culmaily burn running down here, and that was the bit that they straightened all the way down there. Now, the Countess and her son, they weren't really able to do all this work themselves, so they needed to bring some people in to help them do it. And in the beginning of the 18th century, two enterprising people from Morrisshire, William Young and Patrick Seller, they were planning on starting a sort of a ferry from Berghead through to Golspie. So they came over to negotiate terms with the factor and the Countess. And they, having got to Golspie, they discovered that there was a huge opportunities to be had in the land, because it hadn't been proved at all. And William Young was very much he was the sort of brains. He was the man of vision. His probably intentions were probably quite honourable. Patrick Seller, he was a lawyer. He was an entrepreneur and a fixer, and William Young was in his 40s and Patrick Seller was in his 20s, but they were sort of the terrible twins, a good sort of combination, so that they persuaded the Countess to grant them the lease of Culmaily Farm and later Morvick. So they the first task they did was to move the tacksmen and the people. The tack was held by Colonel Sandy Sutherland, who was not at all keen to move. So they had to do quite a bit to persuade him, and he dragged his heels a bit, but it didn't stop them from shifting all the people out. And there was something like 250 people on Culmaily, and some of them were allowed to stay, but the bulk of them were moved out and to other places, usually on the coast. And the time to burn into a canal started, and more about that in a minute. And the plan was originally to have an arable and cattle farm, and one of the first jobs they did was to subdivide the land into 30-acre diked fields. And this was an incredible undertaking, because most of the stone had to be quarried at the Crichton Quarry and hauled over to Culmaily and the dikes built. So and they managed to achieve this in a relatively short time. Then they started on the drainage works and the cultivation of the land. The canal, it was along basically what they did was they straightened the old burn, they dug it down about 3.5 feet deep, and it was about a mile long, connecting Culmaily with the sea, and it also took in a lot of the drainage from the fields. And one of the the main ideas of it was to move goods up and down. Initially, this meant moving shells and seaweed to be brought onto the farm, and once they started to produce grain, it allowed grain to be exported, and they had a flat-bottomed barge with about an 8-ton capacity, so it was no lean operation, and they had an ingenious system of locks, what they call flash locks, installed to increase the depth of the burn. And what they would take the barge up at high tide, and then they would, in order to maintain the depth of the burn, they would, as they brought the barge up, they would shut the lock behind them to raise the level, and then move it up further. And they had about 3 of these flash locks on the way up. Right. Anyway, the canal was finished by 1810, and the Countess paid a visit and was extremely pleased to see that the land had all been cleared, and that there was no trace of human habitation, and the canal was operating. This is just showing you where the canal. That's the canal running down the bit here. This is where the steading was, and the burn meanders down here. It used to meander around here, so it was quite an undertaking to dig this mile long, not quite a mile, but along this long channel, and it comes out of the fleet there. At the bottom of the salmon pond, where the burn goes into the fleet, you can see a structure of wooden sort of shuttering, and that was the first of the locks that they closed in order to bring the level of the water up. Now, what did Salas spent a lot of time up here. He was factoring until he was held to account for his activities in Strathnaver, and he put to trial in Dornoch, and he managed to get himself acquitted, or rather, I think it was a bit of a done deal, the trial. I don't think there's much of a chance he's ever going to get found guilty. But the estate were not keen on him carrying on as factor, so he gave up his role as factor in about 1817, and he turned his activities, interests into full-time farming. So at that stage he had Culmaily, he had Morvich, and in 1814, after they got the Strathnaver cleared, he had extensive hill grazings up there. He had a good bit of enclosed land. At Culmaily he had about 450 acres in enclosures. In Morvich he had 5, and in Culmaily was the main sort of grain producing part of it, and he had a water-powered threshing mill. The mill lead used to run from the burn underneath the Paul's house, and then it circled down and back down to the burn. He had extensive labour. He had quite a big permanent staff, and at harvest time he was looking for about 70 plus in terms of labour force. Strathnaver was very much the sheep breeding ground, and he brought sheep up from Roxburgh to populate or to form the nucleus of the flock up in Strathnaver, and that was a pretty steep learning curve for him, because he brought them up before he managed to get Strathnaver completely cleared. So they had to spend their first year at Culmaily. and of course Culmaily was not equipped for that number of sheep. So in his first year, he lost an awful lot. And once he got his system going, he would take the young stock from Strathnaver, walk them down to Culmaily. The fattening sheep would stay on Culmaily, and the rest of them, the tups and the ewe hogs, would go to Morwick. Now all the sheep were walked. They were driven by foot from Strathnaver down to Culmaily and Morwick, and then the ones that were being sold, they were walked all the way down to Leeds and Manchester and Liverpool. So that is quite some trek in those days. Now Patrick Sellers himself, he didn't have a very nice character, and they believed that one of the reasons could well be that when he was at school he got teased for the size of his nose. So I've never been teased for the size of my nose, but I can imagine how it would feel. Anyway, he was lived from 1780 to 51. Is a factor for a short period. Is a tenant at Culmaily, and then Strathnaver, and then he went. By the time he'd been in Strathnaver for about 10 or 15 years, he built up quite a war chest of money, which was helped by, when his father died, his father gave him a stipend of £1,000 a year as his sort of legacy. And £1,000 a year was worth a lot of money now. With this war chest, he went down to the Morven Peninsula, and he bought a fair quantity of land at Artornish. And when he was down there, he proved as difficult a man to deal with as he had been up in Sutherland. But he was quite forward-thinking, and when he passed it on to his son, they became quite friendly with the people who owned land in Artornish itself, a family called Smith, and his son Alexander married Gertrude Smith, and Gertrude Smith, yeah, and they then had they had about 30,000 acres down there, which they formed a very profitable business. Sellers was a pretty prolific breeder himself. He had nine children, and of those there were five of them turned out to be prosperous merchants. There were two in America, one in Australia, one in London, and two of them were very well-respected academics. The eldest one, Thomas, and the youngest, Alexander Craig, and there's another one. I forget. But so his children. Sellers himself went to his father and made sure he had a good education. He went to Edinburgh University, and he made sure his children got good educations as well. So they all did extremely well. He also had a slightly earlier child in 1813 called Jane, born out of wedlock. But she was recognised as his daughter, and after he married his wife Anne and they moved to Morwick to start his own family, he gave her a job. So that was very kind of him. Was Sir a successful farmer? Yes, he was. He laid the foundations for the farming system at Culmaily, and basically it's been run on the same sort of lines since his day. He also, having suffered from losing a lot of sheep, he looked into how he could experiment, how he could control the natural sheep diseases that occur, things like braxy and all these things that young sheep die of. And one of the ways he managed to get around this was that he developed a two-pasture system of grazing for the animals in the winter. They ran them on turnips, and then at night they put them out onto the hill for heather. So this balance of heather, roughage and turnips seemed to cure the Brexit problem. And at Culmaily, on the dikes at the top of the farm, there are what are known as cundies, which are little holes where the sheep would go through at night for grazing, and they'd come back down through the day. As I said, his success enabled him to buy Antonish in Argyllshire, and he was the largest sheep farmer of his day. And his family continued farming until the beginning of the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th. And in the 1870s, his son would have been in Culmaily then. They moved the steadings and the houses above the road to where they are now. So you can see here that this is as it was in 1874. So this road, the railway had just been built. The road had the A9 was now a growing concern, and this is the steading here, the old traditional steading with cottages scattered about. Now, I think it's probably a truism of most businesses, certainly farming businesses, that you every generation or two you need to have massive investment to modernise your business. And the third Duke, he was a bit of an innovator, and he invested heavily in improvements on the estate. And he was the one who funded a lot of the railway up to Savile and beyond at the Gatemas. And he also embarked upon some very ambitious land reclamation projects in Sheerness and Kildonan. And although I think the ones at Kildonan have stood the test of times, but unfortunately the ones he did in Sheerness, although they were relatively successful and they reclaimed a fair bit of ground, when they built the dam, they were all flooded. So that hasn't been a great success. But on Culmaily, the steadings were relocated and improved to the present site, and he built new cottages for his grieve, ploughman, and shepherd. And a new farmhouse was built in 1895, because at that stage, the Patrick Sellers' son was getting on. In fact, he died in 1892, I think. So his son had taken over. That's Patrick Sellers' grandson. But the estate, he didn't stay for very long. So the estate wanted to build a new house to attract a new tenant. And this is a picture of the house, which I thought it was done by Stephen Brewer in 1988. So I thought it was quite a nice one. Just that would be what it looked like back when it was built in 1896, 1995. Now this is just a bit of interest. This is the Duke. He invented this steam plough, or it's just a chisel plough thing, and he used it trying to do his seeds up in Sheerness and Kildonan. And that is, it's not a very good picture, but that sort of shows how it was operating. Still seemed to require a huge amount of people. Now, this is Culmaily 1906, where the the big house had been built there, the steadings were still there, and this was a field which was they used it for keeping horses in and the old dairy cow, and the burn still running as was. Now on Culmaily, I think 5 families have rented Culmaily from 1810 through to the present day, or through until we bought it. The Sellers family had it till 1901, and then the Forsyth family had it until the 1920s. John Forsyth was a tenant. He died in 1906, and his son William, he took it over. And then during the war, he went to France, and he got killed in the war. And the tenancy was carried on by his sister Jane Forsyth. And I think it was at that stage that they built the conservatory which sits on the front of Culmaily Farmhouse. The Roberts family, they were there. I'm a bit hazy on dates here because I wasn't able to find a huge amount of information on it. But the Roberts family ran from the 1820s to about 1945. I'm not. I mean, we're a fairly sort of middle-aged audience here, and I don't suppose there's anyone who remembers the 50s and 60s, which is. So it's. I mean, it's. Do you remember the Roberts family?
Yes, my grandfather worked there.
Did he?
Chap, Culmaily's father, he was a grieve at
That's the grieve. That's right. Yes.
And my grandfather was at the same time.
Yeah. Well, we've got a letter from Leslie Sutherland's uncle, who was his family stayed there, and he emigrated to Australia, and he came back, and we showed him around the farm, and he had he wrote us a letter thanking us for all that, and he said, just I'd like to read a couple of things from the letter. He said that this was when he came to see us in 2005, and he's referring back to pre-war and wartime, and he said it was strange to see all the houses empty. In our time there was, excluding the parents, 32 altogether. Dunnett the dairyman in the White House, Mrs. Gare, Donald Sutherland, and Big Al in the Grieve, and George Melville, and he had 6 in his house, and Aki Suther, his brother. George Melville, would that be your?
That's my grandfather.
That's your grandfather.
Still in that the cottages do the road.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. So, and these 3 houses had no water, and they had to collect water from a pipe in the wall, and you can still see that today. He also mentioned that the Burnside cottage was where the garden stayed, and latterly it was occupied by the travelling folk, one Jock Williamson and his family. He said, Jock took a wee while to be accepted by the folks in the farm. We stuck in, and in time he was accepted, and it turned out to be an exceptional worker. And then it was the Kinghorns bought it in the 70s and did it up. But he said he remembers the field there. I said it was very handy for catching the milk horse in the very early mornings. And he said my brother was a milkman, and I often helped him before being dropped off to school. When war was declared, we were at the post office when we heard about it. Aki, his brother, gave me the last minute instructions. He handed me the reins and jumped off and away to join the RAF. I continued to leave Old Bank Road and up to Arbor Terrace. Worst part was going down the steep grades, but managed it and set off for home. Not bad for a 10-year-old, as that was then. And then Major Roberts took over the milk delivery. I worked with him right until Milk Marketing Board took over. in about 1944. After the war, my brother returned to the Mccall and was eventually the manager of the estate till he retired. Now, this is interesting, but Major Roberts also had a slaughterhouse at Culmaily. The butchers were Willie Allen, son of the Grieve, Willie Melville, son of George Melville, and it closed down in the 1930s. And so at that time, they had they said in those days in the springtime, Mrs. Roberts used to send for the younger lads to come up and take out the carpets and beat the living daylights out of them, under her watchful eyes, of course. And then they dragged them over the grass to take off any surface dust. The two maids would have had the floors polished by that stage and spotless for the carpets going back. So it's just quite a nice. And he also speaks about during the war. It was all covered in poles. I think he means upright poles rather than.
That's right. Poles and everything.
That's right. Yeah. All the fields below the road, except numbers 9 and 10, and 11, had aeroplanes dotted all over them, and 9 and 10 was part of the extended runway from Girton. Yeah. So here is the map. This is a wartime object. It obviously cleared all the ships away, the planes away by then. These were the concrete roads that used to hold fuel and so forth on. The runways the main runway would have run along this way, and they also had a lot of hangars and a lot of Nissan huts and things around there. When we came into the farm, the hangars had been moved up to the back of the stackyard here. Can't quite see them there. And when my father got the tenancy of it, he just couldn't stretch to bind them, so he had to let them go. But they didn't go far. They went down to Drummond Farm just near Evington, and you can still see them standing there. So if we'd been able to get them, it would have saved us a power of
Alan Agree was a big man. He's standing on the ordinary sized door. You wouldn't get past him to go in. And he's 6'6" as well, so he's a big bloke.
Yeah. So he'd have commanded a lot of respect.
I did that.
Yeah. This is just a few pictures now of modern day Culmaily with the sheep, and here are the fields all neatly laid out with dikes around them. We now run a herd of lean cows, and we had an open day in 2015, and this was part of a tour around it. And there's a friendly bull being introduced to the guests. And again, and this was the year that we were offered the farm by Alexander. So this is the three generations of Mccalls and the younger generation of the Sutherland family. So it's just because it was I remember it was quite interesting day there. And this is us harvesting, and again, and this is just an illustration as to a lot of the drains that they put in. Some of them would be about 12 foot deep, and this is a sump which goes down about 12 foot, and so one of the drains would be dug would be even deeper than that. So Sellers and his men they had their work cut out, because all of these, everything was done by hand, and the main drain from the farm was what's now the railway ditch, which ran along just a ditch in those days, and it ran along towards those out to sea, and that was all hand dug. And in the days when I used to look after the Culmaily farm for the education people, you could still see the bottom of the drains were paved stones, and they were very, very efficient. But unfortunately, in the 70s and 80s, they couldn't get people to hand clean them, use machines and wreck them. Now, that is being a farm that is prone to wetness. Drainage is something that we'll have to do on a regular basis. This is a field which you'll notice as you pass is frequently wet. And this is the field here where we had the bad flood a few years ago. And this is the farm as it is today. You can't really see it, or rather, that's the steading which was it was re-roofed by the estate in about 2012, 2013, and this is a shed that we built. Another two sheds here that we built. And this is just a run through the sort of the buildings that we have on the farm, which are now, these are all fairly new. And the holiday cottages, when we took the farm over, the cottages were in a pretty poor condition. They were damp, so we damped them, and they were quite hard to keep going. So we took them all back to the stone and rebuilt them, and now part of our holiday cottage business. Now, the future. This is always anybody's guess, but I think one of the changes that is apparent to everybody is the changing climate, and Culmaily there's not much fall between the upper bit of the flat fields and the sea, so the sea levels are not going to have to go up that much to affect our farming operations. So climate change is something we have to be wary of, and I think just our methods of farming are bound to have to change in the coming years. Economy and markets, they are, at the moment, they are not too bad for us, but we're still very reliant on continuing government support. And it's the Scottish government is very supportive, so that we hope that can stay. Politics, one of the dangers are the green mayors who are coming in and buying huge tracts of land with a view to using them for carbon sequestration, planting trees, rewilding, etc., etc. So, and that's something that there's a land reform bill that's going through the Parliament at the moment, which is hoping to put a bit of control on it. At the moment, there's no control at all with land sales, and there's no limit on the amount of land that you can buy. I mean, the biggest landowner in Scotland is now Angus, and then he's the second is an investment company, and then there's a whole heap of these type of people who are buying land and using it for non-food production. Changing eating habits and lifestyle. Well, I think that certainly in Scotland people enjoy their beef and the lamb too much to become. So we're not going to have a huge desertion of people to vegetarianism. So, but it does impact on our farming and the challenge of producing food sustainably. Here's just an example of flooding, which happens. It's not happening quite as much now as where we have been doing a bit of work. Sand blow. I'm sure all of your golfers will enjoy getting a good bit of our fertiliser on their greens annually. Partly. And another challenge is fire. This was the fire we had in 2018, and it was quite frightening at the time. So, and that's Culmaily from the hill today. That was taken from the top of the farm. So I think I haven't. If there's any discussion or I meant to say that during before I started talking that if there's any if you wanted to interject with anything, please do. But if there's anything anyone that wants to ask me or to discuss, please do so. There are some people in the audience who are a lot better informed than I am. There's the author of this very interesting book, the man who went too far. Is Ian somewhere here? Ian Leith? No, he's not here. I thought, well, he was going to come. So anyway, it's very informative. It really it examines the letters and the trail of correspondence between Sellers and the Sutherland family. So,
Have you any questions for them? I think you're very comprehensive in your
well,
unfortunately,
unfortunately,
chair, you can talk to yourself and talk. You're right.
Unfortunately, I had more notes which I wasn't able to read, which is just a bit as well.
So we only found you on this for not very interesting talk, and if you wanted to hear it all through. Thanks very much. Challenges to anybody else in the village who's got a particular passion of any topic to get going, and you can do the same next. It's lovely to get the local topic, and it's really interesting.
It's when you start to look into something as well researched as a seller, you go off in different tangents. You go and get interested in one particular bit, and then you think that's actually not interesting to other people. But it's an extremely interesting topic, and as I said at the start, for a man who actually wasn't involved in the management of the state for terribly long, he did an awful lot. Apart from very people like that.
His people skills were cool, but his
People skills were not good.
Are you all ready for a cup of tea? Yes.
We're going to step away. You know what I would love to do, but I get it.
Unfortunately, I just want